Welcome to The Global Founder. I'm Vasiliki Banagi, and today we're joined by Jinsuk Suh, founder and CEO of Homeplate, a US-based company delivering dietitian-designed, chef-prepared meals for seniors. What started as a personal effort to support his grandmother has grown into a mission to raise the standard of elderly nutrition and home care. Zach, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me here.
I would like to start by taking us back to the moment that started it all, which was cooking for your grandmother. What did that experience teach you about care, dignity, and food?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, the first thing is, I think a lot of seniors and caregivers, especially caregivers and loved ones, are unsatisfied with how the current senior care system is structured. It's the senior care facilities, the level of care they have to provide it is very hard and very difficult, but I think for a lot of loved ones and patients, they really want to see a lot of care put into the meals themselves. And it's not just the nursing part of it, but it's also the food part of it. I think as, people age, there becomes this belief that, the level of quality and the level of care that needs to be put into these services can be downgraded a little bit. But I think it should be the very opposite. I think we should have, as you get older, as you age, the level of care should get to the utmost quality. It should be the highest quality possible. And I think a lot of loved ones and caregivers and people like myself and my family resonated with that mission. And so that's really what kind of Homeplate is building upon, is trying to maximize the quality of life for these seniors. Because when reality comes to it, I've talked to many caregivers, and yes, the health is very important of the meals, like how nutritious it is. But at the end of the day, they want to make sure their parents are having the best life experiences, as they're getting older. You want to really make sure they're having the best quality of life that they can possibly have. And of course, with a number of conditions, that comes with, a bunch of different problems of how do we accommodate for them. But I think our mission at Homeplate is trying to combine that dignity, that level of care, with, of course, the idea of, being nutritious, trying to make sure, their health is at the utmost quality, but also their mental well-being is very important in factoring into that. So that's really what we try to do at Homeplate.
At what point did you realize that this could grow from something personal into a real business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, essentially, I started cooking for my grandma, kind of in 2023, a little bit early on too as well. But a lot of family kind of reached out to me first, and they were like, we love what you're doing, kind of more distant family, like my second cousins and such, and like, we'd be interested in this for our parents, right? And so I just started cooking for them. It was just very casual. It was like they would come over, they would pick up some meals, and it was a very, very unofficial way we kind of started. But then as, more people kind of reached out to me, it became from family to friends, and then eventually kind of strangers started reaching out to me too, like, hey, we'd be interested in this service. I realized that, there's a need for this in the market, right? And through that, I kind of had the courage to apply for some pitch competitions. So I did the Mason pitch competition my freshman year, and I won $7,000 through that, which was, at the time, that was like so much money, especially for a freshman. And so I started pouring that straight into the business. And then we launched our own private kind of chef model, which I can talk about more as well. But that's kind of what first validated me to kind of pursue that, is just the support of my family and then eventually friends. And then I think the biggest thing that encouraged me, though, was strangers. Because I think that, they always say there's something called the mom test. Your mom will always say you're doing a great job, right? But I think the really big thing was when strangers were saying like, oh, we love the meals you're making. We love what you guys are doing. That's what brought me a lot of belief in, our mission and what we can do. And
what were the first steps that you took to turn Homeplate from this home kitchen idea to a professional service?
Yeah, well, first was obviously looking at the legal structure of everything. My background's, of course, in the kitchen, so I knew I had the food kind of side of it down. So first was looking at how can we legally operate. And so we found success by being private chefs. Because at the time, even with the $7,000 and the little bit of funding we had, we can't afford a kitchen, that's very expensive. So what we had is we had a team of dietitians, and I was the chef. And I basically consulted with them and went to people's house and cooked for them myself. And so a big thing you learn in the startup world is you have to, what they call bootstrap, right? And it basically means you have to do with what you have. So the reality is we didn't have much money. And we didn't have, to fund a lot of our activities. So how can we move from that was my first goal, right? So that's why we kind of did the private chef at first, right? And then the second thing we have to realize is it's a big kind of idea in the VC world and the startup world is how do you scale, right? So scaling basically means is how do you like multiply your service out? How do you expand your service? And that's something that we're still kind of trying to figure out now. Obviously with something like Homeplate where we have physical meals and we're trying to scale those meals out, it becomes an operational kind of thing to solve, right? So it kind of became, our current focus right now is how can we keep our quality as high as we want to and scale it to as many people as possible. So that's a big focus we have right now.
And how do you ensure that each meal not only meets the medical needs, but also feels familiar and comforting to seniors, especially those from Korean or other cultural backgrounds?
Yeah, that's great. So basically, my whole ideology is that, in my opinion, you need to have someone from the culture to always kind of consult you on the meals, right? So right now what we're doing is Korean and American, right? So me being Korean American, that kind of plays into that question. I have confidence that I can cook American meals. I've grown up cooking American meals, working in American kitchens. And then I've also grown up eating Korean food from my grandma and my parents and during, family outings and being in Korea as well too. So I have a lot of confidence in that. And so that's why I want to deliver Korean and American meals. But of course, we want to expand to other cuisines eventually. But I think to expand, we would have to talk to other chefs that are from those cultures, or not even chefs, but just families from those cultures, people from the culture, because even though the internet is so vast, I've actually found that there's a big shortage of cultural recipes available online. Because, like grandmas don't measure with,
Everything is with the eye.
It's just straight with the eye, yeah. So, it's not like all online, so you have to really go and talk to people. So the whole thing is, if we want to expand, if we want to be, inclusive of all cultures, we need to go and talk to those cultures. So, yeah.
And what role do partnerships with care services play in scaling Homeplate's impact?
Yeah, that's a great, So that's how I think we plan on scaling up is through our partnerships with organizations. And right now we're working with some of the largest senior care facilities in Virginia to help scale our product out. And I think it's a really good way to, one, interact with, a large amount of consumers, but it also allows us to, easily get our meals to our customers in a large-scale fashion, while still trying to keep a quality, high quality up.
Well, you're a Korean founder that builds a business in the United States. And I would like to know, how has your cultural background influenced your approach to entrepreneurship?
Yeah. That's a great question. So, I think one big thing is, a big thing in the startup world is differentiators, right? How do you differentiate yourself from other people, right? Because the reality of it is, they're more likely than not, someone has the exact same idea of you, right? And that's how it goes, right? If you have an idea that no one else has, I don't know if it's a good idea. Honestly, I've seen almost all, like that's usually the thing is, if you really truly have a unique idea, it's going to be like launching spaceships to Mars or something like that, In reality, most solutions have already been done. So then it becomes a personal question of your team, right? And you're increasingly looking at venture capitalists, they invest in the team itself. The ideas really don't matter that much. A lot of people that are investing money right now in large quantities are looking for the actual people themselves. What they want to believe in the people themselves. Their ideas come second because you're going to pivot on a number of times when you're in a venture, and I've pivoted many times. So I think it's a really important part, kind of tying back to my Korean American roots, is that I think tying my Korean roots into our cooking is a differentiator in the business. Because if you look at right now the ready-to-eat meal care industry, no one's really doing Korean like cultural meals, right? There is people that are trying to do it, but these large-scale corporations, it's not really in their focus right now, right, to do these diverse meals, just because there's such a huge operation they have going, right? They're trying to like mass make it for the largest market possible. But I think being Korean American has allowed me to kind of identify that niche now of like, hey, there's Korean people in the US that have put a lot of value into these meals. They've told me they will put a lot of value in these meals and making sure they're medically oriented. And so that's kind of how my Korean American has allowed me to differentiate myself in this huge world of ready-to-eat meals,
And what challenges have you faced operating in this different cultural and business environment, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah. Well, first, you gotta, I think, kind of answer it like quickly is like you have to, like I said, bootstrap. You just have to keep going, right? And you have to pivot many times. Originally we were going to be meals delivered straight to your door, which we are now. But I very quickly realized, we couldn't do that with our current funding. So I quickly tried switching to the private chef model. But there was many iterations that happened throughout there, and there was many times where I failed, and I wouldn't show it to the customers. Of course, it wouldn't pass over to the customers. But for me, it was like there were some days I was going to someone's house, and I realized I didn't put location on for the meals I'm delivering, and now I have to drive 4 hours to someone's house. So I'm like, oh wow, this is gonna take me maybe 12 hours to cook someone like maybe 5 meals, right? So you make big mistakes, right? I realized like if that was one of my employees, I would have not only lost out on a huge amount of money, I would have upset my employee for that. So there's nothing to really do except what they say in the venture capitalist world, in the startup world, is you just got to try it out. You got to fail fast. And so the best way to test out your ideas, especially if you're someone like me who's not been in the industry for very long, is minimize your losses. Don't just go crazy, right? But do with what you best have in your mind and try it out. And then if it fails, it fails, and then you pivot to something else. And so I think that's allowed me to kind of get to the idea where I am, seem as polished as our business might seem. You have to constantly try to iterate, and there's gonna be constant times where you fail. And every successful startup has had that. It's just they don't always show it or talk about it. But it's necessary for the process, in my opinion.
And do you think your Korean roots bring a different perspective to elderly care and nutrition in the US?
100%. That's a great question. Well, a funny thing is Homeplate first was called Elderly Eats, actually. But one of our judges, I remember talking for a funding panel, they hated my name, right? And they said, why would you call us elderly, right? We're 55, like if you're 55 and plus, we don't want to be called elderly. And that is true, I think, in the States. I think like elderly has kind of a sort of stigmatism kind of around the word, right? Like when you think of I think elderly care in America, it's more like putting them in senior homes, right? It's kind of just aging out, right? Kind of losing, your cognitive ability. But in Korean culture, it's very, very different. I mean, you can see being here in Korea, the way we address everybody is always rooted in respect, right? And so in Korea, you got to be respectful of your elders, right? Like it's the biggest sin to call them by put the wrong thing at the end to respect like how old they are, right? And so I think that's played such a big role for me, is in like how much we respect elders. And it's different than the States, so it was actually kind of difficult for me, even being Korean American, having the American side. It was a shock to me how elders were viewed a little differently than how Korean culture does. And just kind of onto that too, I think I've noticed immigrants in general, like my family being a family of immigrants, has played a big part, because I think there's a big thing in immigrant family of home care, right? Like taking care of your elders as they get older. I think there's a big focus on that level of care. They want to provide care for their parents, right? And I'm not saying Americans don't do that as well. They care for their parents. But I think just in Korean culture, it's almost like we're going to take full-time care of our parents as long as we possibly can. And that level of care is something I've tried transitioning into our service as well, as being, kind of caring that much, almost like all our meals are caring, like I think of like I'm cooking it for a loved one. And so I think that's a big part of kind of the culture that I've incorporated into our meals.
You're still a university student, yet you're already leading a social impact company. How do you balance the demands of school and running a business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it's hard. It's like there's no really structured way I do it. I just kind of go to school, I go to do the company, and sometimes priorities changes. But one thing, for example, is I think if you really, really try hard to find, maybe not always brute forcing your way through and seeing if there's a different solution, I think there's a lot of ways to kind of navigate around that. And I'll give you an example. That's kind of an aloof answer. So to give you an example, next semester when I go back, we're looking to scale our operations to a real kitchen, start delivering meals to partners like large senior facilities. And they understand I'm a student, but it's business, right? They don't want to sign a contract with someone who's a full-time student and running what they would consider a side business. So I quickly realized that this has to be kind of become a primary business for me. It needs to be. They need to see that I'm fully committed with my time. And so what I'm doing is next semester I'm taking technically half classes. So I'm only going to be a part-time student through our business program that allows, I'm working with the department right now, but they're going to allow my startup to count for credits. Right, and so that's just a unique point of like how you can kind of navigate. I think sometimes I realized I would get stuck at a point and be like, oh, there's no solution to it. But if you really ask yourself, is there some solution that I haven't found? There's usually an answer to that question.
Well, has being a young founder ever made it harder to be taken seriously? Because you mentioned
sorry, what was the question?
Has it ever made it harder to be taken seriously?
Oh yeah.
Because you said already before that they don't want to hear that you're a full-time. Universities.
No, I think I think specifically in the elderly care industry, what I've noticed is people are very supportive of seeing a young entrepreneur in the space. It's the senior care. I don't think they get. I did say that it's kind of not at a satisfactory level, but it's not their fault. I think almost every person I've talked to in the industry cares deeply for the issue. It's just a matter of it's very expensive to do full-time care. So that's a big kind of hurdle that they have to constantly go over. But I've noticed that a lot of people in the elderly care industry, all the people I've talked to, they're very, very supportive of what I do. And they understand I'm a student. Just for example, our biggest partnership we're working with right now, they've been very accommodating of I'm a student, how can we accommodate for the hours? For me, I think it's less them saying, they've never come out and said, oh, you're a student, how are you going to take focus on it? It's more of, I want to respect that they're putting trust in me, and I want to make sure I can put my best foot forward. But they've been overall very supportive of kind of me being a student and supporting, a young entrepreneur in the elderly care industry.
And what do you think younger founders bring to the table that traditional entrepreneurs might overlook?
Younger founders bring to the table? I think older entrepreneurs are pretty supportive of younger entrepreneurs, actually, of what I've seen. I think the biggest thing is, though, and I don't know if older entrepreneurs don't believe in this exactly, but I think this is kind of a thing I've found out is being naive is actually a really big advantage of a young founder. Because, when you really think about it, I think when people actually try to say, what made you think you could do this, right? I was like, I didn't really think much, it's just kind of I just have this goal and I look at the next steps I need to take, right? I don't actually understand fully all the blood, sweat, and tears that are going to need to go into this. When I started my private chef, I didn't imagine that since I didn't put the location, I'd be driving 12 hours to a client's house, But that kind of naiveness allows for young founders to succeed. And you see that today, all these young founders popping up, trying to create their own startups. Reality is, 99.99% of those startups are going to fail. But we have this naiveness that we can do it, right? And that's kind of the beauty of it, is these young founders, we believe that we can do it. And we don't see all the legal hurdles that we're going to have to do. Not legal hurdles, the legal hardships, all the stuff that we're going to have to navigate through. The pivots we're going to have to do, but that kind of being naive has allowed us to succeed in a way.
What kind of feedback have you received from families and caregivers using the Homeplate meals? Is there any moment that reaffirmed why you do this?
Yeah. Of course, my grandma, I think, was the biggest story of, cooking for her, but I think for me, there's a specific story. Her name was Loretta Foster, and she was one of my first clients for the private chef, and I came to her house and I cooked her all the meals, and it was the first time I've ever cooked really for a stranger for our company, right? And I was terrified, I stayed there for maybe 5-6 hours trying to perfect every single thing I did, and after they emailed me and they were just the food you made was the best we've ever had, right? And they referred us to their whole neighborhood of people, and I don't know, that just one email hey, we really enjoyed your food, we're going to refer you, we love you so much that we'll refer you to other people, just kind of really reaffirmed for me we really have something here and we really can do it,
And how do you measure Homeplate's success beyond revenue?
Yeah. I think it's just our customers, how our customers respond to our meals. I told this to our partners, is that we won't scale until we think we can make our customers satisfied, right? I know it's a big thing, obviously, in the world. You want to scale really quickly. You want to address as much people. Of course, that's very important for a business, but we really want to make sure every one of our customers are satisfied with the meals they have. So our customer satisfaction is our number one priority. And so that means, of course, coupling the idea of the taste of the meal and then the nutrition of the meal. I think if we have a product that people actually enjoy the taste of and is nutritious with evidence-backed research, and we can do that, to a large scale of people, that to me is we've succeeded as a business. We have a completely working business model there. And then of course, then we can look at the numbers, then we can look at scaling out. But first I want to make sure is that in a kind of large but still small scale, can we deliver meals that taste good and are evidence-backed with nutrition? That's my biggest focus.
So in your long-term vision, you plan to expand beyond Virginia, right?
Yeah.
Maybe even Korea someday?
Yeah. I mean, Korea is a very interesting case because they have one of the largest aging population compared to the younger population, which means, there's less young people that take care of their elders. But yeah, we really do plan on expanding throughout the country. And, if we can go international, we'd obviously, of course, love to go international as well.
And what's the biggest lesson you've learned so far about entrepreneurship, especially in the healthcare or elder care space?
Yeah. I said this already, but I think moving. That's a great question. There's a lot of things I've learned, but let me think about the most profound kind of. I keep going back to the idea of. I think it was Mark Zuckerberg who said this, but it was basically the idea of. He basically said no one knows how to build a dam, right? No one knows how to get 1 million people involved in anything, right? So how did he do that, right? How did he create this platform that got millions and billions of people involved? The reality of it is going back to being naive, right? No one knows how to do that type of stuff, right? You just have to start. So I think the biggest advice I would give to people is just start right now. Do whatever you can do right now. Make it as bootstrapped as possible. Make your website as quick as possible. Try to push things out as fast as possible. Talk to customers before you even have something working. Doesn't mean you sell to them. Never sell to them on the start. It's called customer discovery. You need to talk to your customers first, understand them. And so yeah, I would just say just start now. You need to start now and just understand you're going to be naive and make mistakes, but you need to understand that every other success story, they were all naive and they made mistakes. So you really just got to start from zero. You'll eventually make it if you keep trying and you keep failing.
If you could go back to the day when you first started, what would you do differently?
I guess cheesy, but I don't know what I would change. I guess I wouldn't. To answer fully, I don't think I would change anything, because I'm a firm believer of everything happens for a reason. Just kind of the theme of what I've been saying is you need to fail, right? And so I think the reality is it's just I don't think I would change anything I've done in the past, just because all my failures have led to me where I am now, and it's uncertain of whatever I did where I would end up. But right now where I am, I'm happy and I know I made mistakes and I know I've learned from the mistakes. And I think one big thing is there's infinite material online on how not to fail. There's infinite, we have AI that has, scan the web for everything, right? I do ask ChatGPT all the time, hey, am I doing something right? But the reality of it is that there's so many books you can read, there's so many literature that tells you what to do, of how to run a successful startup, which are all important to read. But the reality of it is you only really truly learn it when you act on it yourself. So what I'm basically saying is if I had to tell my younger self something, I think if I would tell them that, they still wouldn't listen to me, because you have to try it out yourself and fail yourself. So I don't think there would be anything I would change. Yeah.
Then before we wrap up, I want you to give an advice to other young founders that want to build purpose-driven businesses.
Yeah. I remember this is one big thing is I think we need to see businesses that are social impact don't need to be nonprofit. I think sometimes social impact and business kind of almost, in the past, it almost seemed like they would go against each other, right? If you're a nonprofit, you do nonprofit things. If you're a business, you make money, right? That's a misnomer in my opinion. I think some of the most successful initiatives I've seen in the social impact space are companies that are for-profit. Because I think when you have a for-profit business, there's also a level of agility, a level of care that gets put into those service and making those customers happy. So I think young entrepreneurs need to see that just because you're a business doesn't mean that you don't have to focus on CSR. It doesn't mean you don't have to focus on social impact. Or just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you don't have to orientate yourself like a business. Both of them are very similar if you incorporate them together. So I think both worlds can each interact with the other and learn how to kind of be kind of the best of both worlds. So I would encourage people to, no matter what kind of startup, even if you have an AR startup, like focus. I think you can orientate your business to social impact in a certain way. There's always a way to identify it, and I think it'll help your business differentiate himself and exceed in different ways that you wouldn't expect. Yeah.
I want to thank you, Zach, for sharing your story with us. That was Jinsuk Suh, founder and CEO of Homeplate. Thank you for watching us. If you want to hear more inspiring stories, visit us at theglobalfounder.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you in the next interview.